Most people are playing checkers while others are playing chess with their lives, and you're the piece being moved. In the next 20 minutes, you'll discover the 500-year-old psychological framework that explains every power dynamic you've ever experienced. If you've ever felt manipulated, overlooked, or powerless despite doing everything right, this changes everything. Machiavelli didn't just write about politics. He exposed the hidden operating system running every human interaction. You felt it, haven't you? That sinking realization when someone takes credit for your work, when the person who talks the most gets promoted while you deliver the results, when the manipulator gets sympathy while you're labeled difficult for setting boundaries. You play fair, you work hard, you tell the truth, and somehow you keep losing to people who shouldn't be winning. Here's what nobody told you. There's an invisible game being played around you every single day. While you're focused on competence, others are focused on perception. While you're building value, they're building influence. While you're waiting for merit to be recognized, they're orchestrating how they're seen. And the most painful part? Society taught you to be this way. Be humble, be honest, be good, and good things will come. Meanwhile, Machiavelli figured out 500 years ago that power follows completely different rules, rules that have nothing to do with deserving it. The people winning around you aren't smarter than you. They're not more talented. They're not even luckier. They simply understand something you were never taught. They understand that power isn't given to the most qualified. It's taken by those who understand its true nature. And that nature? It's darker than most people want to admit. In 1513, Niccolò Machiavelli wrote, "The prince, while in exile, broke and desperate." What he created wasn't just a political manual. It was the first honest psychological blueprint of how power actually works when you strip away all the fairy tales. For centuries, people have called Machiavelli evil. They've used his name as a synonym for manipulation. But here's what they miss. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for cruelty. He was reporting on reality. He was the first person brave enough to document what powerful people actually do versus what they claim to do. Modern psychology has validated everything Machiavelli observed. Research from Stanford, Yale, and the University of Amsterdam confirms that power dynamics follow predictable patterns that have nothing to do with fairness or merit. Studies on organizational behavior show that perceived competence matters more than actual competence. Social psychology research proves that strategic self-presentation outperforms genuine achievement in gaining influence. The framework we're about to explore operates on 3 levels, and understanding each level represents a quantum leap in your psychological positioning. Level 1. Recognition. You'll learn to see the actual game being played, not the noble narrative everyone pretends to follow, but the hidden mechanics that determine who rises and who falls. This is about developing X-ray vision for power dynamics. Level 2. Protection. You'll discover how to defend yourself from those using these tactics against you. You'll learn to recognize manipulation in real time and neutralize it without becoming the villain. This is about building psychological armor. Level 3. Mastery. You'll understand how to position yourself strategically in any power dynamic, not through manipulation but through conscious awareness of the game's actual rules. This is about playing chess while others play checkers. What makes Machiavelli's insights so powerful isn't that they're complex. It's that they're uncomfortably honest, and once you see what he saw, you can't unsee it. Every conversation, every meeting, every social interaction becomes transparent. You start noticing the patterns, the games, the positioning, and most importantly, you stop being played. Here's Machiavelli's core insight that changes everything. Power is not about being the best. Power is about controlling perception of who is best. Let me show you what this actually means. Think about your workplace. Who got the last promotion? Was it the person with the best results, or the person who made sure everyone knew about their results? There's your answer. Machiavelli observed that humans make decisions based on appearance and outcomes, and since most people never see the real work behind outcomes, appearance wins. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." This isn't cynicism. This is behavioral psychology 500 years before we had the term. The psychological mechanism works like this. Human brains are cognitive misers. We take mental shortcuts because processing everything thoroughly would be exhausting, so we rely on signals, not substance. Confidence over competence, narrative over numbers, story over statistics. Here's a real example. Two executives present at a board meeting. Executive A has meticulously prepared data showing a 23% improvement in efficiency. She presents it clearly, answers questions accurately, and sits down. Executive B has weaker results but tells a compelling story about overcoming obstacles, uses emotional language about the team's dedication, and creates a memorable narrative. Who do you think the board remembers? Executive B. Every single time. Why? Because Machiavelli identified a truth about human psychology that neuroscience now confirms. Emotional resonance creates stronger memory encoding than factual data. The amygdala tags emotionally charged information as important. The hippocampus prioritizes it for storage. Your logical presentation gets processed and forgotten. Their emotional story gets encoded as significant. But here's where it gets darker. Once you see this pattern, you notice it everywhere. The colleague who constantly talks about how busy they are gets perceived as more valuable than the one quietly handling twice the workload. The person who strategically mentions their successes gets more recognition than the person who lets their work speak for itself. The individual who positions failures as learning experiences maintains more credibility than the person who admits mistakes. Machiavelli wasn't teaching people to be fake. He was warning that if you don't control your narrative, someone else will control it for you. Think about the last time someone took credit for your idea. They didn't steal your work. They stole the narrative about your work. They positioned themselves as the origin point. And once that perception solidifies, no amount of, "but I actually did that," will dislodge it. Why? Because contradicting an established narrative makes you look petty, while maintaining a false narrative makes them look confident. This is the game you didn't know you were playing. The recognition level isn't about judgment. It's about seeing clearly. Watch a meeting differently now. Don't listen to what people say. Watch what they're doing underneath the words. Who speaks first? They're setting the frame. Who speaks last? They're positioning for credit. Who asks questions? They're demonstrating thoughtfulness without committing. Who provides solutions? They're taking risk others avoid. Who summarizes? They're controlling the takeaway narrative. Machiavelli observed that the prince who appears merciful, faithful, humane, and religious gains more power than one who actually is these things, but doesn't appear to be. Modern psychology calls this impression management. Machiavelli just called it reality. You're starting to see it now, aren't you? The person in your life who always plays the victim but somehow ends up controlling situations. The leader who takes credit for team success but blames the team for failures. The friend who positions themselves as the caring one while consistently making everything about themselves. They're not accidentally doing this. They're running the Machiavellian playbook, whether they've read him or not. Because these patterns are so effective, people discover them independently. Here's your aha moment. Every time you've lost despite being right, it's because you were playing merit while they were playing perception. Every time you've been overlooked despite delivering results, it's because you were focused on the work while they were focused on positioning. Every time you felt blindsided by office politics, it's because you were operating in the stated game while they were operating in the actual game. The actual game has different rules. Rules, Machiavelli documented. Rules. You're about to master. Now that you can see the game, let's talk about how to stop being a piece on someone else's board. Machiavelli's most practical insight for protection is this: the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. This isn't about being aggressive or manipulative, it's about matching your response to the actual threat you're facing. Most people bring fox energy to wolf situations and lion energy to fox situations. They argue with manipulators, wrong tool, and accommodate legitimate threats, wrong response. Let me show you how to recognize what you're dealing with and respond appropriately. The fox recognition system. These are the traps disguised as opportunities. Watch for strategic vulnerability. Someone shares a confidence, positions it as trust building, but it's actually fishing for your vulnerabilities. The moment you reciprocate, they've collected intelligence. How do you know? Real vulnerability is uncomfortable for both people. Strategic vulnerability is only uncomfortable for you. Protection response. Machiavelli advised maintaining calculated opacity. Share strategically. When someone overshares early, match their vulnerability level but on topics that don't compromise your position. I totally understand. I've struggled with work-life balance too. Reveals nothing while appearing reciprocal. Watch for the credit interception. In meetings, someone says, "building on what you said," then proceeds to reframe your idea as their extension. Machiavelli identified this as apparent agreement concealing opposition. They're not supporting you, they're absorbing your idea into their narrative. Protection response. The moment you present an idea, own the next step. "I'd like to take the lead on developing this further," or "I'll draft the proposal and circulate it." You're not being aggressive. You're being clear about ownership before the narrative shifts. The person who controls implementation controls credit. Watch for manufactured urgency. Someone creates a crisis that requires immediate decision-making, limiting your ability to think clearly. Machiavelli noted that princes who master timing master outcomes. Urgency is often manufactured to prevent analysis. Protection response. "Let me think about that and get back to you." Or, "What's driving the timeline on this?" Naming the tactic neutralizes it. Real urgency can explain itself. Manufactured urgency collapses under questioning. The moment you require justification, manipulative urgency reveals itself. The wolf recognition system. These are the direct power plays. Watch for public positioning. Someone challenges you in front of others, not seeking resolution but demonstrating dominance. Machiavelli called this making an example. They're not actually talking to you. They're talking to everyone watching. Protection response. Never defend in the moment. Defending confirms you're on trial. Instead, reframe. That's an interesting perspective. Let's schedule time to discuss this properly. You've just positioned their attack as inappropriate for the setting without being defensive. Then in private, be direct. If you have concerns about my work, address them with me directly first. You're setting the boundary without an audience, amplifying the conflict. Watch for resource restriction. Someone limits your access to information, tools, or people necessary for success, then highlights your reduced effectiveness. Machiavelli warned that one of the primary tools of political destruction is creating conditions for failure, then punishing the failure. Protection response. Document everything. I want to make sure I understand the resource allocation for this quarter. In writing. Can you clarify the decision-making process here? On record. You're not being confrontational. You're creating accountability. The person restricting resources counts on you failing silently. Making the restriction visible makes them accountable for outcomes. Watch for isolation tactics. Someone subtly excludes you from information loops, casual conversations, or decision-making circles. Machiavelli understood that political death precedes actual death. Being isolated from power is the first step to losing power. Protection response. Rebuild connections independently. Creating multiple power connections means no single person can isolate you. Machiavelli advised keeping multiple sources of support so no single withdrawal is fatal. The counter-narrative framework. Here's what changes everything. The moment you understand someone is playing games, stop playing their game, create your own. Machiavelli's insight. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Modern translation. It's better to be respected than liked if you cannot be both. Stop trying to win over manipulators. Start making manipulation costly. Someone spreading subtle criticism about you. Don't defend. Create the counter-narrative. I've heard some concerns about project timeline management. I want to address that directly with clear data. You're not defensive. You're proactively controlling the narrative with facts. Someone taking credit for your work? Document contributions visibly. Following up on the strategy I outlined in Tuesday's meeting, here are the next steps. You're not accusing. You're creating a paper trail that establishes ownership. Someone positioning you as the problem? Don't argue. Reframe the situation. I think we're seeing different aspects of the same challenge. Let's identify the actual issue rather than focusing on who's right. You've just moved the conversation from personal to systemic. The protection level is about making manipulation too costly to be worth it. When you respond to fox tactics by requiring transparency and wolf tactics by establishing boundaries, most people move on to easier targets. Machiavelli understood that being dangerous and being destructive are different things. You don't need to attack. You need to be someone it's not worth attacking. The moment manipulators realize you see the game and have counters to their moves, they recalculate. You're no longer an easy piece to move around the board. Here's what protection actually means. You become strategically unprofitable as a target. Now we enter territory most people never reach. Not because it's complicated, but because it requires accepting an uncomfortable truth. The game exists whether you play it or not. Mastery is choosing to play consciously rather than being played unconsciously. Machiavelli's ultimate insight. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are, and those few will not dare to oppose themselves to the opinion of the many. Translation. Strategic positioning isn't about lying. It's about consciously managing the gap between reality and perception in your favor, because that gap exists whether you manage it or not. Let me show you what mastery actually looks like. Mastery Principle 1. Control the frame, control the outcome. Machiavelli observed that the person who defines the problem defines the solution. Watch how this works. Two managers approach the CEO about budget. Manager A. We need more resources for Q3. Manager B. I've identified an opportunity to increase output by 30% with strategic resource reallocation. Same request, different frame. Manager A is asking for more. Manager B is offering optimization. Who gets the budget? Manager B, because they framed it as gain, not cost. This is mastery. You're not manipulating facts. You're positioning them strategically. In your next meeting, don't present a problem. Present a problem you're already solving. I've identified a potential issue with the timeline, and I have 3 options to address it. You're not bringing problems. Also, you're bringing solutions. That positioning changes everything. Machiavelli wrote that successful leaders make the path to their proposed course seem the best choice. You're not forcing decisions. You're architecting choice architecture. Someone challenges your approach? Don't defend it. Expand it. That's one way to look at it. Here's another consideration. You're not disagreeing. You're demonstrating range. The person with the most comprehensive view appears most competent. Mastery Principle 2. Strategic timing beats perfect plans. Machiavelli understood that opportunity has a smaller window than most people realize. The person who acts at the right moment with a good plan beats the person who waits for the perfect plan at the wrong moment. Here's how masters use this. They don't wait to be asked to lead. They start leading and let authority catch up to reality. In a meeting where no clear decision emerges, the master says, "It sounds like we're aligned on the direction. I'll draft a proposal by Friday and circulate it." They didn't ask permission. They created forward momentum. By the time someone could object, the leadership position is already established. Watch political leaders. Watch business executives. Watch anyone who rises quickly. They don't wait for invitations. They create inevitability. Machiavelli advised, "Make yourself necessary, not just useful. Useful people can be replaced. Necessary people create dependency." How do you become necessary? You become the person who moves things forward when everyone else is stuck in analysis. You become the person who simplifies complex situations when everyone else is creating complexity. You become the person who takes calculated risks when everyone else is playing it safe. This doesn't mean being reckless. It means understanding that perfect safety is perfect stagnation. Mastery Principle 3. Build optionality, not loyalty. Here's where Machiavelli gets really interesting. He wrote, "A prince ought to have no other aim or thought but war, and its rules and discipline." Before you think that's too aggressive for modern life, understand what he meant. Maintain strategic capability even during peace. Don't get comfortable. Don't become dependent on any single power source. Masters always have options. They maintain multiple professional relationships. They develop multiple skill sets. They create multiple income streams. Why? Because the moment you need something, you've already lost negotiating power. Watch how this plays out. Employee A is loyal to their company, defines themselves by their role, has no external network. When layoffs come, they're devastated and powerless. Employee B delivers for their company, but maintains industry connections, develops portable skills, has side projects. When layoffs come, they have 3 offers within 2 weeks. Same dedication, different strategic positioning. Employee B understood what Machiavelli knew. Your security comes from options, not loyalty. This applies everywhere. The person in a relationship who maintains friendships, interests, and independence has more relationship power than the person who makes their partner their entire world. Not because they care less, but because neediness destroys negotiating position. The master doesn't threaten to leave. They don't need to. Their optionality is visible, and that optionality creates respect. Mastery Principle 4. Appearance of effortlessness. Machiavelli noted that the most powerful princes made their success look inevitable rather than difficult. Why? Because difficulty suggests struggle, and struggle suggests possible failure. Masters never let people see them sweat, not because they don't work hard, but because visible effort reduces perceived competence. Think about it. 2 people deliver the same results. One talks about how difficult it was, how many hours they worked, how stressed they were. The other presents it calmly as the expected outcome. Who appears more capable? The one for whom success seems natural. This is why masters never complain about workload in front of decision makers. Complaining signals overwhelm. Overwhelm signals limitation. Limitation costs opportunity. Instead, masters reframe. That was a complex challenge becomes, that was an interesting problem to solve. Same experience. Different positioning. One sounds burdened, one sounds capable. Mastery Principle 5. Strategic Generosity. Here's Machiavelli's most misunderstood insight. He didn't advocate being cruel. He advocated being strategic about kindness. Benefits should be granted little by little so that they may be better enjoyed. Translation: don't give everything at once. Create ongoing value exchange. Masters understand that doing someone one massive favor creates one moment of gratitude. Doing 10 smaller favors creates ongoing relationship equity. The person who helps occasionally but strategically builds more influence than the person who helps constantly. Why? Scarcity creates value. Constant availability creates expectation. This isn't about being selfish. It's about being effective with your generosity. Help the people who will help you build the future you want. Not because you're using them, but because strategic alliances are how anything significant gets built. Machiavelli's final mastery lesson. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. This sounds ruthless until you understand what he meant. Don't be bound by commitments made under different circumstances with different information. Flexibility is power. The master doesn't say, "I would help, but I promised someone else." They say, "That was my intention, but circumstances have evolved." They're not unreliable. You're now operating at a level most people never reach. You see the game, you can protect yourself, and you can position yourself strategically. The question is, what will you do with this understanding? Let's take everything you've learned and apply it to 3 situations you'll face this week. Scenario 1. The meeting where credit gets stolen. Old you. You present an idea in Monday's meeting. Wednesday, your colleague mentions their idea that's identical to yours. You feel angry but say nothing because you don't want to seem petty. By Friday, it's their project. New you. The moment you present the idea Monday, you own the next step. I'm excited about this direction. I'll draft the implementation framework and share it by Wednesday. You've created ownership through action, not just words. When your colleague tries to absorb it Wednesday, you don't get defensive. Yes, exactly what I outlined Monday. I have the draft implementation ready to review. Want me to walk you through it? You're not accusing. You're establishing visible ownership through documentation and forward momentum, the transformation. You're no longer hoping people remember who said what. You're creating evidence chains. Credit flows to documented ownership, not verbal claims. Machiavellian principle in action. Control the implementation, control the credit. Scenario 2. The workplace manipulator. Old you. Your colleague constantly mentions how overwhelmed they are, positioning you to take on their work. You help because you want to be a team player. 6 months later, they're promoted because they had capacity for strategic thinking while you were buried in execution. New you. The moment they position their overwhelm, you reframe. Sounds like we need to reprioritize. What are you thinking of delegating or postponing? You're not refusing to help. You're requiring them to make strategic choices visible. When they try to delegate their work to you, I'm at capacity with X and Y projects. If this is priority, which project should I reduce focus on? Let's align with manager on prioritization. You've just made the cost of their delegation visible to leadership. If they persist, I want to be helpful, but I also want to protect my strategic work. How about we both share our workload in the next team meeting so we can optimize across the team? You're not confrontational. You're making invisible work visible, the transformation. You're no longer the person who absorbs everyone's overflow. You're the person with clear strategic priorities. That positioning changes how leadership sees you. Machiavellian principle in action. Make others' strategies visible, which neutralizes them. Scenario 3. The relationship power dynamic. Scenario 3. The old you. Your partner consistently makes decisions unilaterally, then presents them as done deals. You feel frustrated but accommodate because you don't want conflict. Over time, you feel increasingly powerless in your own relationship. New you. The next unilateral decision. I understand you've already decided, but I need us to make these decisions together. This one is already done, so I'll accept it. But going forward, major decisions need discussion first. When they test the boundary with another unilateral decision, remember our conversation? This is exactly what we discussed. I need you to include me before finalizing. You're not asking, you're requiring. If they argue they're just being efficient, I appreciate efficiency, but inclusion matters more to me than speed on significant decisions. If something feels urgent, loop me in even briefly. Otherwise, I'll make my own decision on things that affect me. You've just established that unilateral decisions work both ways. The transformation. You're no longer accommodating your way into resentment. You're setting boundaries that create actual partnership. Machiavelli understood that relationships without clear power balancing become master-servant dynamics. Machiavellian principle in action. Boundaries without enforcement are suggestions. Universal application pattern. Notice the pattern across all three scenarios. See the actual game: credit theft, work dumping, unilateral control. Name it without emotion. Establish ownership. Require prioritization. Set boundaries. Create visible accountability documentation. Leadership involvement. Clear consequences. Follow through consistently. Action proves credibility. This is how masters operate. They don't get emotional. They get strategic. They don't complain about unfairness. They make unfair tactics costly. Here's what changes this week. You start seeing every interaction through Machiavellian eyes. Your boss asks you to take on additional work. Old you says yes immediately. New you says, I want to make sure I'm focused on highest impact work. Between current project X and this new request, which should be priority. A friend consistently cancels plans last minute. Old you accommodates. New you says, I value our friendship and want quality time together. If plans are tentative, let's call them tentative so I can plan accordingly. Someone takes credit in a meeting. Old you fumes silently. New you immediately clarifies. Building on the framework I presented last week, here's the next iteration. You're not fighting, you're establishing continued ownership. The transformation isn't about becoming manipulative, it's about becoming conscious. You're seeing the game clearly, you're protecting yourself effectively, you're positioning yourself strategically. Machiavelli's gift wasn't teaching manipulation, it was teaching awareness. And awareness is power. We need to talk about something crucial. You now understand patterns most people never see. You recognize tactics most people fall for. You know how to position yourself strategically in any power dynamic. This knowledge is dangerous if misused. Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a manual for leaders, but it became infamous because people confused describing reality with endorsing it. He wasn't saying, be cruel. He was saying, understand that cruelty exists and know how to respond to it. That's the distinction that matters. Are you using this knowledge to protect yourself or exploit others? Here's the responsibility framework. Everything you've learned today can be used two ways. The protection use. You recognize when someone is manipulating you and you neutralize their tactics. You set boundaries that prevent exploitation. You position yourself strategically so you're not an easy target. You see the game so you don't get played. The predatory use. You manipulate others knowing they can't see what you're doing. You exploit blind spots for personal gain. You position yourself at others' expense rather than for mutual benefit. One creates protection and empowerment. The other creates victims. Machiavelli actually addressed this. He wrote about virtù, which doesn't mean virtue in the moral sense. It means effectiveness, capability, strategic excellence. But he also acknowledged fortuna, circumstances beyond control, and necessità, acting only when necessary. The truly powerful, according to Machiavelli, act from necessità. They do what's required, not more. They use force only when persuasion fails. They're strategic because they must be, not because they enjoy manipulating. That's the frame you need to hold. Use this knowledge when necessary, not opportunistically. Let me be specific about what this means. Use Machiavellian awareness to recognize workplace manipulation, not to manipulate your coworkers. Use it to protect your contributions, not to steal others' contributions. Use it to set appropriate boundaries, not to dominate others. The person using these principles ethically becomes respected and effective. The person using them unethically becomes exactly the kind of manipulator Machiavelli was warning about. Here's how you know which one you're being. Ask yourself before any strategic move. Am I doing this because I need to protect myself or position fairly, or am I doing this to gain unfair advantage? If you're countering someone taking credit for your work, that's protection. If you're taking credit for someone else's work, that's predation. If you're establishing boundaries against someone who consistently dominates conversations, that's protection. If you're dominating conversations to prevent others from contributing, that's predation. If you're reframing a situation to ensure your perspective is considered, that's protection. If you're reframing a situation to ensure only your perspective is considered, that's predation. The line is clear if you're honest with yourself. Machiavelli also wrote, "It is necessary to be a fox to discover the snares, and a lion to terrify the wolves." You're learning to be both. But notice what's missing from that statement: being the wolf. You're learning to recognize wolves and defend against them. You're not learning to become one. There's another reason to use this ethically. Strategic positioning built on genuine capability is sustainable. Strategic positioning built on manipulation is fragile. The moment people discover manipulation, all positioning collapses. But positioning built on real value, strategically communicated, is anti-fragile. You're now part of a very small percentage of people who understand these dynamics. Most people will continue playing the game unconsciously, getting manipulated, feeling confused about why merit doesn't equal outcomes. You're different now. You see clearly. And with that sight comes responsibility. Use what you know to protect yourself and others who can't see the game. Use it to create fair dynamics in unfair systems. Use it to prevent exploitation, not to enable it. Machiavelli's actual legacy isn't teaching people to be manipulative, it's teaching people to see manipulation clearly enough to defend against it. That's what you're doing now. The power of this knowledge is that once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. Every interaction becomes transparent. Every power dynamic becomes visible. Every manipulation attempt becomes obvious. That's your advantage. Use it wisely. You're not the same person who started this video. 20 minutes ago, you were playing a game you couldn't see. Now you see the board, the pieces, the players, and the actual rules. That changes everything. Machiavelli didn't expose these dynamics to corrupt people. He exposed them to protect people from corruption. He understood that naivety isn't virtue, it's vulnerability. And vulnerability in power dynamics isn't noble, it's dangerous. You've learned to recognize the game in 3 dimensions. You see when you're being positioned as a piece on someone else's board. You see how to protect yourself from manipulation. You see how to position yourself strategically without compromising your values. That's the transformation, from unconscious player to conscious strategist. Think about how you'll show up differently tomorrow. That meeting where someone usually dominates? You'll see the pattern and have specific counter-moves. That relationship where you felt powerless? You'll recognize the dynamics and know how to establish boundaries. That colleague who's been undermining you? You'll spot the tactics and neutralize them. The hidden game that was running your life is now visible, and visibility is control. Machiavelli wrote, "Wise men say, and not without reason, that whoever wishes to foresee the future must consult the past." You now understand 500 years of power dynamics distilled into practical application. You're not just learning history, you're learning the permanent patterns of human behavior. These patterns will show up this week. Watch for them. The credit thief, the work dumper, the boundary violator, the manipulator. You'll recognize them instantly because you know what to look for. And more importantly, you'll know what to do about them. But remember, this knowledge doesn't make you cynical, it makes you strategic. You don't have to assume everyone is manipulative, you just have to recognize it when they are. You don't have to play games, you just have to see the games being played around you. That's the sweet spot, maintaining genuine connections while protecting yourself from exploitation, being kind while being strategically aware, helping others while maintaining appropriate boundaries. Machiavelli's final lesson, the one that ties everything together. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally. You're now the wise person. You see what's coming. You respond proactively instead of reactively. You shape dynamics instead of being shaped by them. Next video, we're going deeper. We're exploring the specific psychological techniques powerful people use to maintain control even when they're clearly wrong, how they flip narratives, how they maintain authority during failures, how they position themselves as indispensable, because understanding Machiavelli's framework is just the beginning. Now you need the advanced tactical manual, but for now, you have everything you need to fundamentally change how you navigate power dynamics. You see the game, you have the defenses, you know the strategies. Machiavelli didn't write his masterpiece to create manipulators. He wrote it to create strategists who couldn't be manipulated. That's who you are now. The person who understands that power isn't about deserving it, it's about positioning for it. The person who recognizes that perception creates reality more than reality creates perception. The person who knows that the game exists whether you play it or not, so you might as well play it consciously. You're not the victim anymore. You're not the pawn. You're not the person wondering why things keep happening to you. You're the strategist, the one who sees clearly, the one who positions effectively, the one who plays chess while others play checkers. Welcome to the other side of the curtain. Reality looks different from here, doesn't it?